Hey folks, welcome in. This is Chris with Alpenglow Digital. In today's video, we're going to take a look at how to use SharePoint-hosted images in your Power Automate flow. If you followed some of our previous videos, we set up a little Power App, populates a SharePoint list, and then when that list has an item created in it, we send that person an email. And previously, we had just used some third-party hosting site for our images. We'd used a URL in the source attribute of our image tag. But in this video, we are going to go grab the image from a SharePoint location. We are going to then render it in Base64 within our HTML within our email. And that will allow the end user to see it without us exposing our SharePoint location. And we are initially going to just use a static image file path, which just goes to a placeholder image. And then with a few small tweaks, we are going to make that file path dynamic, in our case, based on an event type value, which is one of our SharePoint columns. And then that will allow us to render a different banner image based on an input from the user. So in that case, we have somebody that submits a request for an anniversary party, they see a different image, a birthday party, they see a different image, and a wedding, they see a different image. So this is all using the same Power Automate flow, which is really powerful. And we are just changing the file path for the image, which we then convert to Base64 and ensure that the end user can see it. So without further ado, let's go. Hey folks, welcome to Power Automate. Before we dive into our email and updating how images are referenced, we're going to do a quick overview of the process just so you understand kind of what I'm doing in the background. In a previous video, we created this little Power App, which allows somebody to submit a request for event planning assistance. That then populates a SharePoint list. We have a flow set up that is watching that list, and when something new is created, it sends an email to the person that submitted the request. And the email that is sent looks something like this. Banner image, some static text on the left here. These are dynamic values that were provided by the user, a little bit of placeholder text, and then a little call to action if you have questions. What I want to accomplish in this video is to change how I'm referencing my banner image. There were two images in that email that we had. We had the banner image and the logo that was the bottom left in the footer of the table. Both of them are referenced at the moment via URLs. I don't care so much about the footer image at the bottom, but what I do want to do is change how I'm referencing the banner image, which is right here. Again, this was just something that I had, posted it online, grabbed the URL for the hosted image, and then just plopped it in here. That works fine, but what I find is that teams like to really work within SharePoint a lot, and so what we're going to do in this video is show how you can bring in a file through your flow that's hosted in SharePoint, convert it to Base64, which allows your email clients to read it easily and then displays it in an email. Alrighty, we're going to try to tackle two things in this video. One is grabbing an image from SharePoint, displaying it in an email. That's nice and easy. The second part is taking that a little bit further and making that image that we grab dynamic based on some sort of data. So what I want to do for that example is determine the event type submitted by the requester. And if it's a birthday party, I want to show a certain banner image. If it's a wedding, I want to show a certain banner image, and so forth. So for starters, let's talk about how to grab a file from SharePoint. So if we go to add an action after our trigger and before our email send, there are a lot of great actions here for SharePoint. So if you come up here and type get file, you will see a bunch of different ways that you can grab files or their properties or content from SharePoint. What we want to use for this example is get file content using path. And when that pops up, it's going to ask you to specify where the file's at. So in this case, it's your SharePoint site address. We have event planning assistance site, and then you're going to actually go through the folder structure and find the exact file. So ours is in our shared documents, Power Automate images. And then for the moment, I'm just going to use a placeholder JPEG that I have here. Don't need to worry about anything else here. And I'm going to click Save for now. Now that we've got our image pulled in using this new step, we're going to do a couple things to make our lives easier later on down the road. The first thing we're going to do is rename this step. And the reason I want to do that is because this is using the out-of-the-box name, which is get file content using path. And when you reference this step in future steps, sometimes Power Automate, instead of spaces, wants there to be underscores. Sometimes there are spaces. It gets a little bit confusing. So I found more success just renaming this. So we're just going to use uppercases, but kind of smash everything together into one word. And this is just going to be called our get banner image step. And so we'll just, if somebody comes here, hopefully they understand like, hey, here's the purpose of this step. You can actually go in here if you want to go to settings and see like the actual Power Automate type action, but we're going to give it a friendly name to make our lives easier when we reference it. The second thing I want to do is go back to the old designer. And what I found in my testing is that for whatever reason in the new designer, HTML seems to be getting stripped out. You'll make updates, you'll add maybe like a call span to a table cell in the new designer, then you go to test it, and then you'll come back and look at your HTML and it's just gone. And that's really frustrating. So I have found more success using the old classic designer, which is what we're going to use for the remainder of this video. All right, here on our email step, we are going to jump down here to where we reference our banner. Currently we're using just a URL. I just hosted an image somewhere online. We're referencing it that way. We are going to do something else though, because we want to reference our SharePoint image now. And so what we're going to do is use base64. And base64 is a binary to text encoding schema, and it allows you to represent binary data like you do have with images into plain text. And that is very easily digested by Outlook clients, by Gmail clients, whether it's web or the desktop versions, and seems to be universally a pretty good way to represent image data. And the nice thing too is if you have a SharePoint hosted image, you don't need to worry about folks receiving this email having SharePoint access in order to display the image. It will just encode it here through our flow and then serve up an image that everybody can see. All right, so base64 has a very specific way that it wants to be written within your source attribute, your image tag. So we're going to scroll in and zoom in here a little bit. And we're going to write out the expression fully. We'll talk a little bit about the syntax. And again, the nice thing is this is going to be a little bit intimidating if you haven't written this before. But once it's written, copy, paste it into another flow, and you're good to go. So it's really just the first time that's a little bit confusing and painful to learn, but then it gets easier for future projects. So we are going to pass it two things in this source attribute. It wants to know the type, and it wants to know the actual content that it needs to convert to base64. So the first thing we're going to do is tell it what data type is this. So we're going to literally type out data : and then we are going to use an @ sign and curly braces. And what this is an inline expression syntax for Power Automate. And so this will disappear a little bit when we cut this and paste it again into the window, but this kind of tells it, hey, I want you to look at the result of an expression that I'm going to write in here. So the expression we're going to write is going to look something like this. So again, within the inline expression syntax, we are going to grab the output from a previous step. So we're going to type outputs plural, and it's a function. And we're going to grab all of the output, the big output object that we'll get kind of behind the scenes from our get banner image step. And this is another reason why it's nice to rename that step. One word, don't have to worry about how spaces or weird characters are represented in the name when we're trying to fetch it through outputs. And so we're going to get back one big giant object in the background or a bunch of data. And what we want to drill into specifically is the body of that object. And in our case, for this first part of our string that we're going to feed the source attribute, we want to know what the content type is. So we are going to grab the content type. So again, I'm using output to grab this output function to grab all of the data from the get banner image step previously. We're going to go into the body of that response, and we're going to look for content type specifically. And so what this is probably going to return is like a PNG or a JPEG or something like that that will tell base64, hey, this is the type of data you can expect to ingest. So once we've got the data type all shored up, we are going to enter in a semicolon. And now we're going to tell it, what do you want to convert this to? In our case, we want to convert it to base64. And it's very important that there's no space in my testing after the semicolon. So it's semicolon, immediately base64, comma, and then we need to actually feed it the content of our image that it will convert. So I'm going to rewrite kind of this same expression before, outputs, get banner image. And we're also going to be inside the body still, the body of our kind of output from the previous step. And instead of content type here, what we care about is the actual content of our image. So again, two pieces of information we're feeding the source attribute here. One, what's your data type? Well, it's going to be the content type of the output from this step, which is, I think, a JPEG for our case. And the second piece we're going to feed it is what we want to convert it to, which is base64, and the content that it should be converted to. So again, data type that you can expect to receive and how we want it converted. Those are kind of the two big steps. Okay, so what we can do now is I'm going to cut this whole thing because Power Automate doesn't recognize this kind of properly. And so if we were just to run a test, your image won't show. So if you cut it and then paste it, you will see the UI update that indicates, hey, it looks like this is a SharePoint step that you're referring to in both of these. And so now our inline syntax has kind of been accepted by Power Automate and now understands kind of what we're trying to accomplish in our data. So let's save and give it a test. I'm going to zoom back out here now that we have that written. So here's our new big long string essentially that we're going to feed the source attribute. And I've previously submitted a request. So in this case, I can go ahead and test it with one of my recent triggers. So I'm going to do that. And for reference, here's the image that we're using kind of as a placeholder. So this is what we expect to see at the top of our email. Here is the output from our test. So you can see our placeholder image is up here and it's been converted to base64. Of course, you can't really tell by looking at it. And then this was served up to me on an Outlook desktop client. And it looks great. This is not the prettiest placeholder image, of course. One of the nice things to using this strategy is that if you had a different placeholder image, for example, that you wanted to use, or in a real world use case, you had a different image that you just simply wanted to swap out, you could do all of the file replacement on the SharePoint side of things, and you wouldn't need to touch Power Automate at all. We are going to take a look at something that's a little bit more advanced. So this looks fine. Again, not the prettiest placeholder image, but that's okay. What I'd really like to have happen is that when my event type is a specific value, I'd like this banner image update to be kind of more on brand with whatever event type I have. So I think I have a couple. I think I have a birthday party, a wedding, maybe an anniversary party. And so what I'd like is for the banner image to be dynamic based on the event type. And so that's going to require that we come back into Power Automate and we add another step. And then the nice thing is we don't have to touch base64 again. So our email is pretty much set. What we're going to do is come in here and instead of placeholder.jpg, we are going to use a value from our SharePoint item and then generate this file path kind of dynamically. And then that'll then reference the correct image. There are a handful of ways that we could accomplish kind of the same thing, but I want to try to stick with simplicity. So previously I had mentioned that we may need to add another step and declare a variable and then use a variable in this string for the file path. And I was experimenting a little bit, and what's nice is the data you get from this first step actually works pretty well as is. You don't really need to touch up the data. This could be something like maybe I need to replace spaces with a certain character or send things to lowercase or do stuff like that. If you did need to augment data that way, it might be nice to do that in like a variable step and then reference that variable down here. But in our case, instead of placeholder.jpg, we can actually delete the word placeholder. And here in our dynamic content pane, you'll see the type of event value. This is coming from when an item is created, which is our initial step, our initial trigger here. And if we punch that in, then it's going to use this file path to go find the correct banner image based on the type of event, which could be a wedding, an anniversary party, or a birthday party. What you do really want to be mindful of is that the value passed in here matches exactly what the name of your file is. And so in our case, we're explicitly calling all of these JPEGs. So back over here in SharePoint, where we have our files hosted, I want to make sure that all of these that are going to be referenced, so our anniversary party, birthday party, and wedding images are all JPEGs, and that the naming convention matches exactly what somebody would select in our tool. So if you come back over to Power Apps where somebody's submitting a request for the first time, wedding, just one word, anniversary party, 2 words, uppercase A, uppercase P, and a space. We want to make sure that those match exactly with the name of our image, so that when it gets pulled in dynamically, it matches and it finds the right file and renders it in our email. At this point, there's really nothing else we need to do to our flow. So again, we don't need to change our email because this is referencing the output from this step. And so all it cares is that you've gotten an image, and then it will encode it in base64. But we already wrote out everything we need for that, and we just changed this one single value. Instead of placeholder statically typed, it is now a dynamic value from SharePoint. So what I'm going to do is come back over here to my Power App. I won't include this in the video just for expediency's sake. I'm going to submit 3 requests, one for a wedding, an anniversary party, and a birthday party. And we're going to take a look at each of the emails. And our hope is that the image for each of those matches what we have here in SharePoint. So here's a quick overview of what our anniversary party image looks like, our birthday party image, and our wedding image. I haven't spent the time to make sure that these are the same aspect ratio or resolution, so if you do end up using this in production, you should be mindful of kind of how your images look, and you want everything, of course, to be consistent. So I'm going to submit some emails and we'll take a look at the outputs. All right, I submitted our 3 entries, one for each event type. Here's the first one. We have an anniversary party, and it shows our picture with the champagne glasses. The second one is a birthday party. It shows our cupcake image. And the third and final one is our wedding, which shows our heart design. All right, folks, that does it for our quick overview of how to use SharePoint-hosted images in your Power Automate email. We find this strategy works really well if you have a team that is maybe responsible for marketing collateral and they're used to using SharePoint. They just want a location to dump the images. And then whoever's responsible for creating the flow can just go in with this step, grab the image, render it in base64 to ensure the end user can see it, but we also kind of protect the source location for our asset. And so instead of exposing our SharePoint site to everybody to ensure folks can see it, we do a little conversion, and then base64 ensures that whichever email client the end user is using, they can see the image. So hopefully this has some applicability to your use case. So go out, experiment, have fun. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.